Hi there and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about fuel in Portugal. So we're going to be dealing with petrol or gasoline stations and all the various questions that exist about things like, is the fuel of equal quality? Should I get the cheapest fuel? Is this good for my car? We're going to take a look at all that stuff. Fuel in Portugal is a source of massive debate. You know, I love using Reddit and I like to go on Portuguese Reddit and check out what people are saying. And I've also read quite a lot of news articles, dozens of them dealing with this topic. And there are very, very different opinions voiced by different groups in society on the debate over fuel and the quality of fuel. And basically the question is it worth it to pay for premium fuel, and do some kinds of fuels perhaps pose dangers to the health of the engine of the vehicle and the longevity of the vehicle, etc., etc. Perhaps the main question though is simply, where do I get the cheapest fuel? And I think we can answer that quite easily by taking a look at one of the various websites that exist in Portugal for price comparison. So let's do that first, and after we've done that, let's address some of the other questions. All right, so first of all, in terms of establishing where the gasoline or petrol near you is cheapest, I would offer up this website, which is one of several, but I found it quite useful. And basically you can go here and you can put in the type of fuel that you want to buy, and you can select your district that you're in and the council that you're in, or the brand is also possible. Here as well, the type of fuel and the distance of up to 10 kilometers from your location. So, I mean, what I would do is this, all the types of fuel, and I would put in my district, which is Leiria, and I can put in the council or the municipality as well, which is Pombal. Not interested in the brand, and just click on that and it will give you a list of various different companies that are offering all the different types of gasoline. It will show you what types of gasoline they offer, and if you want to check out which ones are the cheapest, you can just scroll down to the bottom and you can see here it's divided into 7 different kinds, and you will see like the top 5 different offerings for each, which one is the cheapest in your area. So for example, if I'm looking for gasolina simplest 95, which I would be, then I can see the Intermarché is the cheapest gas station in my area. If I wanted to compare that Intermarché price of €1.60 to the price in, for example, BP, then I would simply scroll up until I found a BP gas station, for example, either of these two are BP, and look at gasolina simplest 95. There you find it's basically 177 there, it's 180 closer to Pombal. So there's a price difference of 17 to 20 cents per litre, which equates to a 10 to 12.5% price difference. And I think that that price difference basically holds true, or that or more, across all of the different types of fuel that are available. So that is a website which is very, very helpful. I've used it, and it's also helpful when you're traveling, maybe to somewhere unfamiliar. Most people might know which fuel station is cheapest in their own area, but they might not know when they're venturing to somewhere new. So it's worth taking a look at, and as I said, I will link to it in the description below. Now, also, I want to point out an article that I've leaned on quite heavily here, which is this article from Poligrafo, which is a SAPO website, which rates the claim that simple fuels that are bought in low-cost gas stations are actually the same, or basically the same as those bought in branded stations, to be true or mostly true. And you can read the article in detail. There's a lot of information in there. Another article which I will link to in the description below is this one by DECO Protest. This is the organization that I will refer to that conducted the survey of the 4 cars over 12,000 kilometers, and you can see basically the result there is that there were no significant differences in terms of fuel consumption or engine tank capacity or anything like that. And here you can find more details related to the findings of the study. So without further ado, let's dive into the rest of the video and look at the information that these studies revealed and whether or not it's really worth it to pay up for premium fuels in Portugal. All right, talking about the quality of fuel, I don't think that this is a debate that I can settle, but I will tell you my opinion on this, my strong opinion on this, is that you should buy the cheapest fuel which is available, and that would be gasolina or gasoleo simples 95, or if your car requires it, 98. The premium fuels that are available on the market, I think there is a dearth of evidence to indicate that they actually bestow any real benefit on the vehicle. And if they do, it is one of these minimal level benefits that isn't even perceptible and certainly not worth the cost of making the investment week after week in paying for that premium fuel. So let's talk about why I feel that way. And the first thing I'd like to talk about is the idea that supermarket fuel or hypermarket fuel is cheap, dirty, adulterated, and dangerous. You get quite a lot of people saying this on Reddit, at least one segment of people. The idea is that, fuel sold by mainly supermarket chains like Auchan, Pingo Doce and Intermarché would be the three main ones. I personally use Intermarché, though I've used Auchan on one occasion and it was fine too. The idea is that the costs of the fuel there is just so cheap, it's so low, that the quality must be lesser somehow. It's dirty, it's watered down, I read in several posts. This is just unlikely to be the case. I think the probability of this is extremely low. First of all, modern cars and modern engines can't tolerate any real kind of water content beyond a very low level. So the idea that the fuel is being watered down is ludicrous. I mean, if a gas station was doing that, you would quickly notice it because there would be basically a fleet of stranded vehicles within 5 kilometers of it, and it would quickly be picked up. So I think we can put that one to bed. As for the idea that the fuel is dirty, sad news is the fuel is exactly the same. What I mean by that is that if you're buying simples, which is simple petrol or simple gasoline or simple diesel, doesn't matter whether it's 95 or 98 or whatever it is, it's the same. It comes from the same source. There's only one refinery in a place called Sines in Portugal. It's run by a subsidiary of Galp and it produces all of the fuel in Portugal. Now there are occasions where Portugal doesn't produce 100% of the fuel that it needs and some imports are required, but in most cases Portugal produces far more fuel than it requires and actually exports it to other countries. So you're getting the same fuel from the same refinery, which is managed by Galp, and it provides the fuel to everybody, to Intermarché, to Auchan, to BP, to Galp, to Shell, to everyone. Therefore, it's coming from the same source. So the notion that the fuel is dirty from the supermarkets or something, they'd have to be purposely adding in some dirt in order for it to get that way. Or they'd have to have facilities which were filthy. And as we know, most of the supermarkets' fuel stations are actually much newer than many of the established players like Repsol or Shell or BP. And, one of the things which leads to fuel becoming a bit dirtier can be that the tanks of the gas station itself are a bit old and they're not cleaned that often maybe. And that can lead to, some residual stuff being in the fuel that probably shouldn't be there. But it's related very much to the age of the gas station rather than people putting in dirt or having bad habits or something like that in terms of the way that they deal with the fuel. So because the supermarket gas stations tend to be newer, I think that's a non-concern and may even be a positive for buying fuels from supermarkets rather than from branded fuel stations like BP or Galp or Shell. All of the fuel which is sold in Portugal, whether it is from Sines, as the source, which probably almost all of it is, or whether it is imported, it doesn't matter. It is regulated in accordance with European standards and national standards in Portugal, and it is checked regularly by DGEG, which is the energy regulator in Portugal. They're subject to spot checks. I will provide a link to an article in the description where an official from DGEG actually discusses simple fuel, and he says it's the same everywhere in the country. The principle of simple fuel is that it doesn't have additives beyond the additives which are absolutely necessary for the function of the product, such as, for example, anti-foaming additives, which will be added to the product. But these are not for performance enhancement or for getting additional mileage or anything of that nature. They're simply to allow the gasoline to be delivered into the gas tank safely. So the fuel is the same, and moreover, manufacturers of vehicles which are sold in Portugal as part of the EU, they design the vehicle to run on simple gasoline. They don't design the vehicles to run on gasoline which has been changed by Repsol or BP or Shell or Galp or all of these individual players. They can't do that. They choose one simple gasoline which is regulated by law, and they design the vehicles to run well using that based on the standards which are set out in the law. Whether it's diesel or whether it's gasolina, simple as 95 or 98, those are the fuels which are used. Now, whether your vehicle uses 95 or 98, the octane content will change. That depends on what kind of performance category the engine of your vehicle is in. If you're driving a Ferrari or a Porsche or some kind of, sports car performance vehicle, then yeah, you should put 98 in it. But if you're just driving a normal car like a Renault Clio, or in my own case, a Mazda 3 or something like that, there's absolutely no benefit of putting gasolina simple as 98 or any kind of gasolina especial 98 into the car because it's not designed to run on that fuel, and it's not going to do your engine any good whatsoever. I'm not saying it's going to do it any harm either, but what I'm trying to convey is that it's not going to do it any good. You're not going to get any benefit. You're just spending more money for absolutely no reason. So if anyone's doing that, they should stop it. It is mandatory in Portugal for all fuel stations to sell simple fuel, both 95 and 98. It is the law. And the idea of simple fuel does not indicate inferior quality or anything like that. All that designation shows is that the fuel has not been subject to the addition of additives. It's not a statement about this fuel is less good than something else which the company is selling. Not at all. And I think anyone who's thinking in that manner probably needs to adjust their thought process. Now, the brands such as BP or Galp or Repsol or whatever, Shell, they do offer, in addition to simple versions of diesel and gasoline 95 and 98, they actually offer what you can call gasolina especial, which is like their improved version of either 95 or 98 or diesel, where they have put their own kinds of additives in it, which are supposed to do things generally like clean the engine or improve mileage. And the idea is that you will get less wear, more lubrication in the engine and stuff. And these types of fuel cost significantly more. I mean, the price difference is usually in the range of 15% extra, something like that. So you would expect that if you're paying extra every time, that you're going to get a benefit that would at least equate to that. Now, interestingly, there was a study done in 2012 by a consumer advocacy group, a big one, called DECO Protest in Portugal. And they took a look at 3 identical vehicles, and they were inspected at various stages, at the beginning, the middle, the end, etc., by qualified professional mechanics. And they drove these vehicles for 12,000 kilometers using different kinds of fuel. And the idea behind this test was simply to test the effect of the additives. In this case, they were putting up a simple version of diesel versus diesel from various brands which has additives in it. and they were testing them to see what the impact was. Now, the findings of this study were quite stark. There was very little difference, almost statistically insignificant, between the performance of the cars. When they were inspected, there were no issues found. There's no difference in like the cleanliness of the engine or anything like that. And in terms of the gas mileage that was achieved, the miles per litre or per gallon, there was a difference, and it was in favour of the gasoline that had additives in it, but it was marginal. There was a 2% difference in gas mileage. Now, if you contrast that with like a 15 or even 20% difference in the initial price to fuel up week after week, then you would have to wonder whether that's worth it or not to you. I think most people would decide that it was not. In addition to that, DECO Protest indicated that the margin of difference was so tiny that other factors could easily have affected it. For example, differences in tire pressure could have as much as a 5% impact on gas consumption. So that really tells you how little the saving is. Now, of course, the companies like Galp and Repsol, etc., the industry bodies came out to defend their products, as they're obliged to do, basically, and say that they've moved on since 2012. They've changed some of the additives, and various other tests have shown that they have benefit. I mean, if you choose to believe that, that's fine. And it may be true. I really don't know. But personally, I choose to believe the test of the consumer group. I think that it's accurate. And when you also consider that the regulator, DGEG, are telling you that gasolina simples is the same everywhere, in every fuel station, in that scenario, I think that fueling up with gasolina simples and BP or Galp, where it's much more expensive, makes absolutely zero sense compared to getting the same product in Intermarché. And I also, based on the DECO Protest study, fail to see any justification for putting any kind of additive-based fuel in my vehicle. I don't think that, based on what they had to say, their findings, that it's worth it at all, either in terms of gasoline consumption or in terms of wear and tear on the engine. Certainly in my own experience, I have fueled up in Galp many times. I have fueled up in Repsol. I've fueled up in BP, which I frequently do because I have free coupons from Pingo Doce that give me €40 a month in BP fuel. And I've also fueled up in Intermarché frequently. And I have noticed absolutely zero difference in terms of gas consumption or performance. The experience of driving the car is exactly the same. And I think that's because I'm buying the same product. Now, I do not use the superior forms of gasoline. I'm not using the gasoline especial, which has additives in it. I've never used that because I don't believe that. Frankly speaking, I think that after 20,000 kilometers or something, if the engine's a bit dirty and when I get the car serviced, the mechanic tells me I should do it, in my particular case, then you can buy engine cleaning additives. You get a little bottle, you put it in your gas tank and you do it, it's clean. And those products are relatively inexpensive, especially when compared to the price difference that you would incur if you were putting in expensive gasoline every single time. So I think that's a much better strategy, to do this as needed, if it's needed, and not to do it as some kind of preventative measure, because it might not be necessary and it might give you absolutely zero benefit. In my personal opinion, fundamentally in Portugal, the price differentiation that we see between different kinds of fuels and different stations, even gasolina simples is much more expensive in Galp than it is in Intermarché or Auchan, for example. And also the branded fuels, the especial fuels, 95 or 98 especial, they're much more expensive. What causes this? In my opinion, it's simply down to branding in a lot of cases. These companies like BP, they do advertising, they do a lot of promotion. I think that that's responsible for it. They're building their brand, so they think that they can charge more. That's part of it. Another part of it is that Galp and BP and Shell, they do have a tendency to have service stations or gas stations along major arteries, such as along highways or along national roads. Whereas with Intermarché and Auchan, etc., you tend to see that their gas stations are located more in the supermarket car park. So I'm sure BP and Shell, etc., are paying far, far more for the land or the lease of the land than, for example, the Intermarché fuel station would, which seems to be just part of their car park, and they might pay almost nothing for it, or even nothing for it, because it's part of the same company and they already own the land. So yeah, I think that's a factor. And in addition to that, the kind of services that are offered in Intermarché and Auchan are super basic. You can get diesel, you can get simple gasoline 95, and you can get simple gasoline 98, and that's it. You can't get any service, you don't get car washes, there's not a shop, there's no other service offered there. They're not offering toilets or cafes or anything like that. But many of the BP and Shell stations do offer additional services. Most of them have a little shop, for example, at the very least. And I think that that's also factored into the fuel price. So the question is, do you want to pay for that? My answer is no, I don't. So in conclusion, and I'm sure the debate will continue to rage on, whatever I say, it's not going to settle it. But in my opinion, the wisest strategy in Portugal is to avoid the brands such as BP and Galp and Repsol. If you're buying simple fuel, whether it's 95 or 98, you should be going to hypermarket fuel, supermarket fuel like Intermarché, Auchan, Pingo Doce, whatever's available in your area. By all means, take a look at the website that we discussed right at the beginning of the video, which I will link in the description below, and compare the prices in your area to find out which ones are best. But if you're buying simple fuel or simple diesel, it's all the same. You don't need to worry about it. The standards have been checked. It's based upon legal standards in the law on a European and Portuguese level, and it's inspected regularly by DGEG to ensure conformity with that. There should be no concerns, and moreover, it's in line with the specifications of the manufacturers. Now, if you really believe in the benefits and the value derived from premium fuel, by all means, go and continue to buy gasolina 95 especial or 98 especial from BP or Galp or whatever. If you truly believe that it's beneficial and you want to get it, then go for it. No one's going to judge you. But I think for the vast majority of consumers in Portugal right now, the best choice is just the simple gasoline varieties, and the best place to buy them are definitely the supermarkets, because the value is far better there than it is in other gas stations such as BP, Shell or Repsol. Alright, that'll wrap up this video. I hope everyone found the information useful, and I will see you again in the next one.